What do you really know about your investments and your financial advisor? Gary Cinderbrandt, a veteran advisor and founder of Better Path Training, has spent decades helping both financial advisors and their clients get it right when it matters most. Gary pulls back the curtain on the advisory world to reveal the truths, the gaps, and the opportunities that most people never hear about, but absolutely should. It's about more than money. It's about legacy, trust, and making sure the people you care about are in the right hands. Welcome to If the Public Only Knew. Now here's your host, Gary Cinderbrandt.
This is Gary Cinderbrandt, and welcome back to If the Public Only Knew. There are certain guests from time to time you feel completely fortunate to be able to invite on your show, and they actually say yes. And today I am just thrilled to welcome Dr. PhD Tatyana Mamut, who has a PhD in cultural anthropology and has emerged as one of the leading experts in the cross-section of people and their behaviors and what's happening as artificial intelligence continues to develop and impacts all of our lives in an ever-increasing way. Tatyana, thanks for being here. It's really a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Your background was fascinating to me. PhD in cultural anthropology, and then kind of a consistent movement from the behavioral side, cultural side, to an intersection initially with technology that could make life a little bit easier, but now the evolution into AI, even the management of AI chatbots. For a lot of our audience, they think AI might be something cool to generate an image or ask it a question or rewrite a letter. But when we start to get into the concept of agentic AI versus generative AI, we get in the concept of chatbots, we get in the concept of AI tools actually being able to take massive amounts of large language models and come up with new ideas. How do you see that evolving? More importantly, what about that whole industry has attracted you, and how do you see that integrating with cultures as we go forward?
Yeah. So, one of the things that we bifurcate is humans versus technology. And in fact, when you study anthropology, you realize there is no humanity without understanding technology. We as humans have evolved because of technology. Every leap in our evolutionary timeline has been a leap where we have integrated deeply with a new technology that we have invented. So let me give you an example. Agriculture, huge technological leap, right? The ability to actually grow food that meant that we could have more stable cultures, more stable settlements. It also physically changed our bodies, right? We started eating more grains as opposed to other things. So human evolution has always been an aspect of humans interacting with technology. So for me, it's funny because a lot of people in Silicon Valley have no idea about humans, human behavior, human evolution. They have a very short time frame that they understand. And I think one of the reasons I've been really successful in Silicon Valley as a technology leader is because I understand the longer arc of history. I can see what kind of patterns are emerging because at the end of the day, humans are the ones that buy technology. Humans are the ones that use technology. And so without that understanding, people often fall short. They build the wrong things. They fail to understand how to drive adoption. And my capabilities and my background and understanding humanity and how humans have always interacted with technology and how the next kind of evolution in technology is going to bring humanity forward has been a real asset in my job, like in my career and in getting to success in business. So one of the things I've been working with AI for over a decade, because when I was an executive at Salesforce, in 2015, we started working with Einstein. And that was a different type of AI, though. That was a very domain specific and expert AI system, right? And it was a predictive AI system. So we would take data from lots of different places, not from lots of different places, from a particular very specific data set, for example, which opportunities were more likely to convert, right, for Salesforce, for sales leads. And we would feed that into an algorithm. That algorithm was, it could often, change on its own and find patterns on its own, but it was optimized just to look for the pattern of which opportunities were most likely to convert. And then it could then predict which next opportunity was more or less likely to convert. You see what I'm saying? So it's a very narrow domain specific system. In 2022, when I used ChatGPT in November, it blew my mind because all of a sudden, this was not a narrow expert system. You could ask it anything from any domain. And this was, while people don't believe, we have general intelligence yet, at some level, that was general intelligence, right? It wasn't narrow domain specific intelligence. It was artificial general intelligence. Now, how good it was, it's another question. But the evolution that we are experiencing right now is unlike any when we've had very domain specific technology. And, when we had the agricultural revolution, that was a domain specific technology that really helped, completely transformed humanity. When we had, electricity, that was more of a general technology because we were able to apply it in many different domains in our lives, but it didn't kind of learn on its own. And now we have this technology that not only is it a general technology and not a narrow domain specific technology, but it's one that is set to evolve on its own alongside humanity and not just be controlled potentially by humanity. And that is really a major shift. And that's one of the reasons that have dedicated myself and my career now fully into this domain, because it is a really large shift and it cannot be understated it can't be overstated how large this transformation is going to be.
On the one hand, when you mention things like farming, and I think about things that have changed society in a meaningful way, the technology that's integrated, the printing press always comes to mind, being able to communicate information in a large way. And then depending on who you ask, when you ask, the next thing that comes along is DARPA or the DARPnet or ARPANET. And then we have a browser with Mark Andreessen's original browser. And then all of a sudden we've got cell phones, which are smartphones, and we have access to information everywhere. And now we have AI, which not only can access that information, but can generate new information.
That's right.
To give it to you. So it seems like we're becoming, I don't want to use the word introspective, but it almost seems like we're taking the sum total of all human knowledge and now being able to access it in a way that isn't necessarily domain specific, but maybe situationally specific, such as what you did with Salesforce. How do we identify these folks that are most likely to buy? Now, was that done based on past observable patterns?
Yes.
Okay. Was there anything that looked at the underlying personality characteristics of those potential buyers to try and align them in a time and place where they would be more susceptible to an approach? In other words, how do we bring in the cultural aspects of the group that you might be targeting, which maybe you weren't doing back then, but maybe we're able to do now? I'd love you to comment on that as well.
So in that particular case, the question is always, do we have the data? And do we own the data? Actually, there's a third one. Is it in a format that we can use? Okay, right. The first question is, do we have that? Our system could have used, if we had like Myers-Briggs, personality type assessments for every potential buyer, we could have done that. We didn't have that data. We just didn't have access to that data, right? The next question is, who owns that data, right? Even if we could find that data, is it actually legal for us to pull that data and actually use it for our own proprietary system, right? So say we could somehow get access to everybody's Myers-Briggs scores, right? Do we actually have the license, right? Or the rights to use that data? And then the third one, which AI, the current generation of AI does solve, is it in a format that we can use? And again, one of the big leaps in the current AI systems versus the older ones from 10 years ago is that you don't need to reformat the data. It can take in text data from any language. It can take in visual data. Many of the models, that's why multimodality is such a big deal, is because it can actually use images or use videos in some cases, right? It can use PDFs, right? And embedded images or tables in PDF. Some models can read those. So those are the big questions around the data in order to then train the model.
Well, here's where it gets a little bit scary. I've been experimenting with an application that I mentioned to you that I'm developing with doing deep research across the entire web for whatever is public information. I don't deal with PII. It's just too dangerous with what I do. But I would pull down a perplexity profile that might have, for someone that's well known, dozens and dozens of different sources. And then based upon using either Notebook LM, which is kind of a closed off system, I can put it in and I say, what can you tell me about the personality characteristics of this particular individual?
Yep.
And while they're not filling out an MBTI, it would be pretty close to what they would fill out.
So I bet you could get a really good personality profile on me because I write a lot, I speak a lot, right? Like, so on me or any public or anybody who has a lot of content out there, I bet you could do a pretty good job.
Well, I'm going to find out because after we're done, I'm going to send you what I find out.
All right.
It's going to say, this is who we think Tatyana is. And this is an approach you'd probably respond to if a financial advisor were to reach out, not trying to sell or anything, but saying, hey, we agree on a lot of different things. I'd love to talk to you about my business and your business to see where the alignment is. Because to me, that's always something that I can learn from. The best advisors, and I think the smartest people out there, recognize they're never the smartest person in the room.
Right.
And if you think you are, you need a new room. Go someplace else.
Right.
You don't listen when you're talking, or you don't learn when you're talking. You learn when you're listening. So it's just, the whole thing is just fascinating as to where this comes together. What's your thinking on where it starts to go too far, on where it starts to actually become intrusive, in that we're able to do such a deep dive into someone's publications and where they show up in social media and where we find them interacting with the web in general, that it's almost as if we're stalking them? Do you see that as a potential problem at some point?
So there are two, I would think about it as two different phases. The first phase is in getting insight about the person, understanding the person. And the second one is, what do you do with that information? For me, I think understanding people, again, with publicly available data, I mean, that's okay. Like, for people to understand others better, or, understand someone in order to make a connection, that's just information for yourself about learning about a person. Where I think things get intrusive is a lot of the, frankly, the sales systems that are currently being developed with AI, like the evolution of robo people and actually trying to mimic somebody's, a real human's voice in order to make it sound like it's really, that is awful. Like, if anyone ever does that, it immediately breaks my trust. Immediately, right? Because I feel like I'm being lied to.
Yes.
And so I do meet a lot of startups that are developing these fake humans, and they just feel like lies to me, and honestly, if anyone cold calls me, they're on my do not call list forever. They're on my shit list forever. I do not appreciate being called out of the blue, at all. At all. I feel like it's really disrespectful. I feel like you're not valuing my time, and I will not work with you ever again. I don't care how good your pitch is. I don't care how brilliant you are. I don't care. Do not waste my time. If you don't value my time, I will never work with you. So
I now get solicited on text the same way.
I know,
cold
me
texting,
too.
it's brutal.
It's awful. And like a lot of the LinkedIn systems now, a lot of like I mean, I understand that people are trying to reach people, but no, like don't do that. Like
Right.
I speak a lot of places. If you want to meet me, come to one of my talks or something, but like don't waste my time. But so that's what I mean. Like I think that it's what you do with that insight, right? Where I feel like that it crosses the line and breaks. It's really what you're talking about is how do you build trust with people?
Do you feel that
And
I'm sorry, I interrupted. Please continue.
and I think that the number one way for us to deal with that is to really put the golden rule in place there, right? And say, would I appreciate it if someone used my publicly available information to try to learn more about me, right? For me, I think that, yeah, that seems fine, right? But as long as it's accurate and correct and they're not publishing stuff about me that, isn't true. But the next piece is then what do you do with that information, right? And do you try to intrude on my time with that information?
So when we look at kind of the two sides of it, you have a vendor and you have a potential buyer, staying in kind of the Salesforce CRM. There is an observable pattern that the more those two parties share at a base level about their core beliefs about the world in general, the higher the probability is that something good might happen. Simon Sinek, who I'm sure you've listened to from time to time, has an interesting quote. It goes, "People don't buy what you sell; they buy why you sell it. They buy what your underlying motivation is, and if that's what comes through, that's more important than the what happens to be." And anecdotally, I've trained thousands and thousands of financial advisors, and I have deep information on literally that number of them. And when I go through and do a quantitative assessment of their business, it'll break down in the Pareto rule, it'll break down 80/20. But then when I add qualitative measurements to it, and they're just baseline qualitative measurements. How do you feel the quality of this relationship is? The highest is a client that became a great friend or a great friend that's a great client. The next one is a great client that I trust. Next one is don't know enough about them. And the other one is I wish I didn't have them. So we start to do those kinds of rankings. There's an absolute bifurcation that there's what I call the yellow box. People can have a lot of money, but they're not all that productive. The financial advisors really don't like dealing with them for a variety of reasons. And then there is on the other side, the green box, where they may have people there that don't have a lot of money, but they love them and would never consider not taking care of them. And the advisors that focus on developing what I call an aligned practice, it's almost too easy for them. They're some of the
Right.
biggest advisors on the planet. And if they notice somebody that's going to be yellow boxed on the inbound, they can identify those patterns. They'll just say, listen, I think you'd be better off over here.
Yeah.
So that's looking at kind of a large sample of human behavior and
Mhm.
outcomes, observing it, and then say, well, what if I could figure that out ahead of time?
Yeah.
And it seems like that's where the tools are starting to go.
I totally agree with you. I mean, one of the hilarious things with speaking of financial advisors is when financial advisors talk to me about my goal to retire, I'm like, you don't get me at all. Like, my goal is to never retire,
Right.
right? Like, my grandmother is 99 years old and she is spinning up businesses like all the time, right? I mean, like I imagine if I live to be 120, I will be like her and I will be working all the
Yeah,
time. So,
I understand.
so yeah, I mean, something simple as that, right? Where if you try to talk to me about a retirement goal, you've lost me. Like, I don't even know where you're coming from. Like,
Yeah,
I don't particularly, it's not a thing for me. In
right.
fact, that's like a negative for
Well,
me, right? If I
it's
have
really
to
funny. Yeah,
retire.
it's funny because that's kind of what they're taught to ask.
Right.
Like what do you need for retirement kind of thing. I look at that, I go, I don't know. I mean, I'm going to work till I drop dead. I happen to love what I do. I assume you're the same way.
Right.
So when I speak with people, I'm not looking to ask them to tell me what they want to do. I'm trying to find out, what are you doing currently and how does that relate to who you are with your life values, what your objectives are, whatever they may be. It's not for me to say, but do those things line up? So I'm always much more interested in a potential client's motivations about what they do rather than trying to get to some finite goal at a date. Now, the industry has made a fortune off of that with
Right.
target date funds and things. You're going to eat this much and that much, and that's fine. But people are different all the time. And that's when we get into this whole concept of, would I, as an advisor, be out looking for people that want to retire at a certain age? Let me share a brief story. Then I
Yeah.
have a couple more questions. I was over in Aspen the other day, talking to a very senior advisor at a large brokerage firm who was interested in hiring me on as his consultant slash coach. And his entire process was extraordinarily defined. And I started to ask him, how often do you talk to your clients? Well, at least once a year, or if they call. I said, how many of them would you consider to be close friends? Oh, none. I don't want my. I said, how many friends do you have that are your clients? Oh, none. I don't want to do that. I said, are you any good at what you do? Oh, I'm very good. So what you're telling me is that you're willing to let your closest friends go to people who may not be as good and get totally hammered. And what message do you think you're sending by not even talking to them about if they're okay? And he was just flummoxed by that question
Right.
because it forced him to examine what his underlying motivations were, which primarily where he just wants to make more money. And basically, I just kind of ended the meeting and said, look, you've got a lot of thinking to do. I'm not sure I'm for you.
Yeah.
Because he had his thing, is like you say, his goal-based thing, running seminar after seminar after seminar. And I said, look, if that works for you, keep doing it. It's fine. But I don't think I'm the guy for you because I'm going to scramble your brain because I don't look at it that way. It was very cordial, but it's amazing how much his behavior has that negative impact or less than optimal impact on the clients he's sworn to serve. It just wasn't my cup of tea, as I would say. It did not resonate with me.
My, I think that one of the things that you're really honing in on is you might be really, like when you say, what's the criteria that he's using to assess that?
None. He's inviting people to seminars. If they
Mm,
show up, he pitches them on effective tax planning and estate planning and proper retirement planning. And he's very proud of his seminars, but he doesn't know anything about his clients.
yeah.
And since all of his clients are senior citizens, he's constantly replacing. He has no connectivity to their heirs or their grandchildren or anything like that. He just keeps churning it at the top. And
Yeah.
my comment to him was, you're going to work 10 more years. You're going to be doing the exact same thing until you die.
So,
And when you
yeah.
retire, if you retire, no one's going to want to buy your business out
Mhm.
because there's no theme to it. There's no permanence to the business. So, look, to each their own, but it was just kind of the antithesis of what you and I are talking about, which is really trying to find a cultural alignment with people that you serve. Where do you see that evolving to in the next 18 months? I mean, I look at the pace of evolution of these tools, and frankly, it's hard to keep up with. I mean, I try and spend at least a couple hours a week cruising YouTube for
Mhm.
somebody's doing something new with chat or perplexity or
Mhm.
something else. Um, but I find myself too frequently going up the learning curve because I'm fascinated with this new toy.
Right.
And then I think of ways I can use it.
Yeah.
And there goes the whole day. So where do you find that kind of stopgap where you can say, all right, this is doing something that's meaningful to me in what I'm doing professionally or what I'm doing vocationally? How do you qualify that?
So, I have a startup that focuses on generative AI. So, I have to be as deep as possible in all the latest and greatest and the newest research and all of that. For me, it's really, have a hard challenge. And when I have a hard challenge, I'm actually pretty good at starting with a blank page, But the initial research now with, deep research is just I mean, I go to deep research a lot. So, I, pay the $200 a month and use that because I've just found that to be so incredibly valuable. I think that where the larger perspective is that it really challenges me to say, okay, if AI is going to continue to get better at this and this and this, at the writing, at the creating presentations, at the research, right? And that's, what I was good at as well in my former career, even product development, right? Even understanding what new product should I be creating. If AI is going to get better and better than me at that, what are the aspects of myself that I need to cultivate to still maintain my value? And it's not just maintain my value in a transactional way because I need a job, but it's because I really want to create value in the world. I want to have impact in the world. It's really important to me. And it's actually, what's interesting is that working with AI has drawn me deeper into understanding the talents of being human. And one of them is exactly what you were just saying, Gary, is that energy that humans can bring to a conversation.
No question about
That
it.
sense of trust that
Yes.
humans, that connection, right? The eye contact. Even if you have a robot with eyes that look like human eyes, you're not going to gaze into a robot's eyes and feel like you love or trust them.
That is true. You hit on so many cogent points. I have a course I'm probably about to launch on Kajabi, shameless plug, called the
Mm-hmm.
Rainmaker Collective. Again, I'm very focused on this next generation of FAs and senior FAs being able to hand their clients over to a caring group of younger or next generation FAs. And one of the modules in the book with the video or in the slides of the video is something called the single client theory.
Mm-hmm.
And it talks about alignment. And it talks about how when you're dealing with these, what we'll call green box clients, you're energized when you get off the phone. You're stoked to talk to them. They're interesting people. Even if you're not talking about their portfolios, what'd you do this weekend? How are your kids? They become that deeper sense of human connection on a lot of those calls. And that's what I did my entire career. A lot of them, we would never even talk about their portfolio. I might talk about their cat, or I might talk about the kids at school or their latest
Right.
vacation. And then invariably, hey, by the way, Gary, I was talking to my friend George. I think you ought to give him a call. He could probably use your help.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized I don't have to ask for this. I just have to be who I am in a genuine fashion. And that business, I'll naturally attract other people that feel the same way. And then there have been studies done on this, not just the ones I've done with my grouping, but the differential is amazing as far as how much you enjoy your job. And if you ask a great financial advisor, when do you want to retire? The answer is going to be never, because
Right.
it doesn't feel like work.
Right.
I mean, I'm hanging with my friends and I'm caring for people
Right.
that care about me. So there's that two-way connection that goes there. But it's not because they made them a lot of money. It's because they care about each other in a very deep and meaningful way. So when you talk about it, almost acts as an enhancement to your own humanity. For me, I think my journey in AI thus far has been one of clarification of my own journey and expansion of how I can describe that and bring other people through to the point where they can then start to kind of move forward on their own.
Yep.
And to me, I don't want to say I'm obsessed with that mission,
Yeah.
but I think about it more and more as I think about what the possibilities are and what
Yeah.
can
I
happen.
mean, this is the thing. If right now, if you're using these tools a lot, either what happens is some people are like afraid, like, oh, this thing is going to take my job. Other people are inspired because they're like, wait, if this thing is going to do these things that are currently part of my job, how do I grow into the next version of what this job can be? And so I recently ran a 5-week project in helping a team adopt AI agents that, these AI agents now were going to do what pretty much the whole team spent 90% of their time doing right now. Okay. And at first people were really scared, right? It was a 2-day workshop, across a 5-week project. People came in and they were really scared because they were like, okay, am I even going to have a job a few months from now? And as we went through the 2 days, they said, oh, wait, if these agents are literally just doing all the spreadsheet work that I do, I could do this. And then I could add value to my, customers in this way. And then I would have time to do these other things, right? And to connect with people in person. But they don't have time to connect with any of their customers in person right now because they're in spreadsheet land, right? And so it was just a transformation. It was a growth. It was a challenge to grow. Nobody grows when they're comfortable.
No, yeah, I agree with you. I call it constructive discomfort. And if you're comfortable, you're going backwards because the rest of the world's moving forward. And it's something my dad kind of taught me at a very, very early age as a result of this. One or two more questions, if I may. This is just fascinating. Can you explain in plain language to our audience, LLM, generative AI, and agentic AI?
Okay. LLM stands for large language model. There are also large reasoning models, but reasoning models are an evolution of the large language models. But just so you know, they're pretty much, the same. So large language models were an evolution. They were a breakthrough in AI because they took all of the, data on the internet, which is all language data, right? Some of it is, and these models learn all languages, right? So they basically take all the data on the internet and they ingest them, and they do exactly what the human brain does, which is essentially they create connections between different types of data inputs to be able to abstract certain concepts. Concepts are essentially called features sometimes in LLMs. And then they're able to generate, now we get to generative AI, they're able to generate new knowledge based on conceptual understandings of the language that again, it's language in, right? Creating concepts through abstraction. And then the output is something new to the world that has never been seen before. So these are not databases. The difference between this technology fundamentally is it's not drawing data from a database. It's generating new data based on its training and its conceptual understanding. And this is where you hear things like the model weights, right? The weights are the strength of connections between different conceptual areas so that it can generate new data. Okay, so that's why it's called generative AI. And it's also called stochastic or probabilistic because there isn't a database in the back where it's just pulling a value from a database and then outputting it to you. There is some potential for getting things wrong, just like humans, right? Like if you ask a human, a question, and you think they probably know the answer because they learned about the topic before, there's still a chance that they might have misremembered or just forgotten or for whatever reason, gave you the wrong answer. So these models do the same thing. They're exactly like brains, like human brains. That's why they're not 100%. And they will never be 100%. Everybody needs to understand this. They will never be 100% accurate because it's not a database that they're pulling from. But there are ways to get it to very close to 100% accuracy by having LLMs supervising other LLMs. So basically, if you have a supervisor, that's how you make a worker more accurate. Same thing with these LLMs. And that's what my company builds, actually. So, and then the next piece is you asked about agentic AI, right? So agentic AI is we move from LLMs. So we're all familiar with like ChatGPT, like a chatbot. We call them LLM chatbots, right? So LLM chatbots, you ask them a question, they generate a new answer for you based on their training data. It becomes agentic when it's connected to another tool, so that, say it gives you an answer, right? So you ask ChatGPT, this is the most common example that people get, like, what's the next flight going to New York? And then ChatGPT says the next flight going to New York is at, 2:05. And then it becomes agentic when you say, okay, book that flight for me. And then it goes and it books the flight for you. It actually does the action, right? So it has the agency to not just give you an answer, but to actually perform an action, the next action. The other piece with agentic AI is you can just say to ChatGPT, find me the next flight to New York that fits with my schedule, and then book it for me. At that point, there is another step that happens, which is it has to make a lot of decisions. So There's two ways that it can do that, right? It can say, here are all the options, pick one. And then when you pick one, it books it. Or it could just do it all on its own without giving you, like, it can make the decision, right? You could read read your schedule. It could know your personality type. It could know your preferences. And based on all of that knowledge, it could just make all of those decisions on its own. You don't have to program the workflow necessarily.
Fascinating.
And so that's where we're going, especially in workplace environments and especially in multi-step workflows and jobs. These agents now can make their own decisions. You don't need to program the workflow anymore.
It's fascinating. It truly is. Your company that you're currently working with, that you're currently CEO of, is
Wayfound. It's an AI agent manager and supervisor. So it helps AI agents built on this technology behave well, comply with your guidelines, comply with your regulations, make sure they're not giving out biased information. We have a whole bunch of responsible AI frameworks also that we put in. So it's all of that.
fascinating. I can't thank you enough for coming on. I could talk to you for hours because everything you mentioned just starts to trigger this mind map for me of I can do this, I can get that, and then I can play with this and play with that as well. So once again, I can't thank you enough for coming on and joining us. I know my audience is fascinated by this, and as financial advisors, we don't think we're going to be replaced by AI because AI can't emulate intuition and empathy, at least no time soon. But I do find my prompts are very polite of late, just in case we hit the singularity that I never insulted them or got nasty with them. So thank you so much.
Empathy, yeah. So one more thing. Empathy
Sure.
is actually pretty good at.
Okay.
Energy is another thing.
Hmm.
Because energy might be more of actually a physical body thing.
Yeah. It's funny. I'll put something in and I'll say, there's one last question. I'm sorry. Again, I'm triggered with so many different things. The app that I mentioned before, which hopefully I can share with you, when I originally spec'd it, looked like to get to just a working model was probably 6 months and maybe $100,000 to $150,000. And then I found out about an application that could write all the code translating from plain language.
Yep.
And now I have HTML, Python. I've got 2 databases running in the background and Supabase. It's locked away in GitHub. These are things my son, who is very heavily into these things, knows on a daily basis. And to me, I'm like, what? I have my own repo? Oh, repository. Good. I'll take it. And I'm watching this thing generate code line after line after line. And we'd like to refactor this to make it a little neater. I'm like, sounds good to me, and click, and it does it. So it's almost as if you've got an idea at this point and you want to build something, instead of having to go out and find a full stack engineer to write all the code and the UI and UX, there are now tools out there
Yep.
that do it for you. In your day to day, are you using these types of tools to generate and debug your own code with things that you work
Yeah,
with?
we use a whole like my development team uses a whole bunch of them. I did try a bunch of the just off the shelf tools for prototyping. They didn't quite give me what I needed for our particular application. But yeah, my team, my engineers, they use Cursor, they use Windsurf, they use, V0, they use like everything. So they use Anthropic. So they use a lot of different tools
It's pretty
for their
amazing.
development.
Yeah, there's no way I'd be anywhere close to what I've been able to build without some of these tools. So
Exactly.
thanks again. Hopefully we can
Yes.
do it again sometime.
All right. Thank you.
Once again, this is Gary Cinderbrand. We've been chatting with Tatyana Mamut, PhD in cultural anthropology, and one of the wisest people around the future of AI I've had the pleasure of speaking with. Thanks again, Tatyana.
Thank you.
Thanks for checking out If the Public Only Knew with Gary Cinderbrand. If you found today's episode helpful, be sure to follow the show and share it with another advisor, investor, or friend. For more on Gary, or to check out any links mentioned in the episode, head to the show notes. We'll see you next time.